Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So today we're taking a look at some day one decks for tonight's new season pass card, the Phoenix Force. Phoenix Force is a 5-cost, 6-power that reads, on reveal, revive one of your destroyed cards and merge with it. That card can move each turn. So pretty neat design here. However, I do think it is one of the weaker season pass cards. Now, the season pass are usually worth the value just because of all the other stuff you get on top of the card. But if you're a player who doesn't feel like buying every season pass that comes out, I do think this is one of the ones that you won't miss out a ton if you do skip it. There are some fun combos we're going to look at, but overall, I do think that this card is kind of mediocre, and until it gets some more support, I don't really think they're going to be a whole ton of homes for it, outside of some Mimi combo shenanigans, but we're going to take a look at the decks for it in a minute. I think they just did like a bit too much with this card. Like the design is really cool, but it's so restrictive because if you're getting it down on turn 5, that often means you're only going to have one turn to be able to move it. Even trying to like ramp to cheat it out isn't always super effective. We are going to have one ramp list that can kind of do it, but at that point you aren't really running much destroy stuff. It's just this deck demands, or this card demands, multiple different archetypes that are trying to do different things, and it feels like we don't have enough cards that synergize with each other across those archetypes to really make this come together. That's kind of my initial impression of the card. I think it's cool. I do think there's one major downside, though, about this card that isn't super apparent just reading the text, but we did see this in the developer update video, and the Phoenix Force itself actually doesn't really stay on the board. It merges into whatever it revives, and that's actually a pretty big downside in the case of probably the most common combo card that comes to mind in Human Torch. Well, you blow up a Human Torch, you bring it back with Phoenix Force, you move it, it gets bigger, profit, right? Pretty cool. Well, it's not going to be pretty cool when, you know, most of the decks in the game are running Killmonger to deal with the bounce deck, and your big flame and birdie is going to die to that Killmonger, because it is a Human Torch. It is not a Phoenix Force. It is a 1-cost card. It just has the Phoenix Force move ability and the stats built into it. So I think that's kind of a shame, and it's also a shame because it means we're never going to see the variant on board, much like Hulkbuster and Morph. And I think that's just a little disappointing because they have some really cool variants for this card. I like the default art a lot, but the season pass, like level 50 variant, is really, really cool looking, and we're never going to get to see it outside of like the collection or your hand, or I guess if you play it and you haven't destroyed anything and you're just playing a vanilla 5/6, which you probably don't want to be doing. But yeah, I think it's like pretty mid to bad, at least with the current card pool. Maybe over time this gets better as more tools get dropped into move and destroy and whatnot. We are going to have more destroy cards coming next month, but even looking at some of those, it's like I don't really see the pieces here to get this card off the ground, at least right away. But maybe in the future we'll get more stuff that'll help it out. But in the meantime, you know, if you always buy the pass is still a good value, even if you don't play the card a lot. But if you are not really into having to buy the pass every month, this is looking like probably an easier month to skip, as I think it seems very unlikely this card is going to be meta relevant unless some other big changes happen, and even then I'm really not sure. But let's take a look at some decks for it, because we do have some fun combos. I do think it will be a fun card in spite of it not being the best card in the world. I think it will be a very fun card to play. It's just I don't think it's going to have a lot of success in the current environment of the metagame we have right now. All right, so taking a look at the decks here, we're going to start with the 2 decks I think have the greatest chance of actually making this card work, and then we're going to go off the deep end a little bit into the Mimi territory. But this first one, Phoenix Torch, so we are just gluing 3 different deck archetypes together here with Move, with a sprinkle of Destroy and Shuri on top. So the idea with this deck is we have 3 main targets for this Phoenix Force to copy. Human Torch, Multiple Man, and Vulture. We have our main ways of moving these cards with Iron Fist and Ghost Spider. You could try and put one more move card in here, but I do think it's just so hard to fit all the cards you want to in this list, and I think we really do need those move cards to be pretty cheaply costed, like Iron Fist and Ghost Spider are. Cloak could be a consideration. Another consideration is you could put Heimdall in this deck if you really want in place of the Chavez, but I think the Chavez is going to be really important in this deck because it is essentially a combo deck, and getting that early game draw consistency I think is more valuable than what Heimdall adds to the equation on the final turn. But that aside, so the game plan, we blow up one of these 3 move cards, then we bring it back with the Phoenix Force, we move it around, we get a trigger, we try and copy it with Taskmaster. Now, we have the Shuri package in here because Shuri is obviously good with the Phoenix Force. This can be especially good if we are able to get it off on a Phoenix Forced Multiple Man, as we can move it around, get another copy of it, we can copy it with Taskmaster. That's generally what we're trying to do, and then we have Red Skull in here as a backup target, where it's like, hey, if things aren't really working out with the Phoenix Force plan, well, we can still do old reliable Shuri, Red Skull, Taskmaster. It's not as good as it once was, but it'll still get you there versus some decks. So that's kind of the idea with this one. I think this deck does show the kind of the weakness of this card, though, in that it's really hard to fit everything you want. You could try and go a more move direction with this, but I'm not sure if it's really worth it. I do think having the backup plan with Shuri, Red Skull, Taskmaster, it both helps the Phoenix Force, because Shuri Taskmaster is good with the Phoenix Force, and it gives us another backup plan if we don't draw our Phoenix Force, basically. So that's the idea with this one. This is probably the deck I am most excited to try, even though I'm not sure how it's going to do, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun to play. But obviously, there are going to be times when you draw the wrong half of your deck, you're missing your move card or your destroy card, and it's going to feel a little rough, but I think that's just a side effect of having to mash together multiple archetypes. The other place I think this card might have some success is in a Sandman ramp deck. So this is a pretty basic one. You can customize it a little bit, although I think most of these lists are pretty stock. The main tech here is Iceman, but there are 2 other 1-drops you could consider in Spider-Ham and Nebula, depending on your preference. I like Iceman because sometimes that 1 extra cost can be really, really impactful for messing up the opponent's plan, but that's kind of personal preference. We have our ramp tools in Electro, Wave, and Jubilee. Standard Sandman stuff. Sandman and Wave help us deal with bounce. Even then, bounce is still pretty scary, but sometimes it helps versus them if they don't play around it. And then we have a bunch of 6-drops. So the idea, where does Phoenix Force come into this deck? Well, simply put, you ramp Electro on your 3rd turn, you play Black Panther on your 4th turn, you blow it up with Zola on turn 5, and then you bring back Black Panther with the Phoenix Force. It comes back as an 8, it gets the +6, and then it will double. So 28 power Phoenix Force, and you'll have your other 2 Black Panthers in other lanes. Now, obviously, that's the ideal case scenario, but you don't necessarily need it to be Black Panther. Like, you can get value out of Zola blowing up Doom, or blowing up Odin, or blowing up Magneto. Any of your big things, really. Even, I guess, Jubilee. You get another pull from the deck. So that's kind of the idea with this one. This is the one where you're building around it the least, but unfortunately, I think that's probably the most consistent way to make this card work, is not going all in on it, just playing it in a deck that is already well-rounded, and this gives us kind of a boost to one of the very powerful combos we have in the deck with Zola. Next up, we have a dedicated Deadpool Destroy deck. I mean, what's there really to say about this other than it's a Destroy deck, and we're putting Phoenix Force in it. I really don't know how good Phoenix Force is going to be in a dedicated Destroy deck. I think it's like probably pretty mediocre. I don't even know if it's going to make the cut, but we can certainly try it. You do have to be a little careful in this one, though, because if your Phoenix Force does come back as a 1-drop, you have to be real mindful with your Killmonger as well as opposing Killmongers. So I do think that is a little rough for it, but it'll be interesting to try out. Not too much else to say about Destroy that hasn't already been said. Solid enough deck, but we'll see if Phoenix Force ends up making the cut long term. only time will tell. Then we have a bit of a new take on what used to be a really, really kind of popular deck, and that was like the Thanos Lockjaw with Death and Killmonger and whatnot. So we're trying to bring this one back a bit. We have Spider-Ham as another thing to throw into the draw and a bit of interaction. That's also kind of a replaceable spot for another good 1-drop like Iceman. Killmonger, so we can blow up the stones, make our death nice and cheap. A lot of times Phoenix Force will probably be getting a stone, but maybe you can set it up so that it doesn't get a stone with Venom. It's just like this deck, we're not really going all in on the destroy theme. It's because obviously destroy with Lockjaw is a kind of dangerous thing, but I don't think you really necessarily need to go all in with it. We have a bunch of big stuff we can cheat out of the Lockjaw with the stones, like Null, Chavez, Thanos, Death, Devil Dino. We have some interaction with Shang-Chi and Wave, which not only helps us ramp things out, but can help control bounce a bit. Same kind of thing with Killmonger. Blows up our own stones, makes Death cheap, makes Null bigger, makes our Phoenix Force come back as a stone, which maybe it's not the most ideal thing, but I don't think you can really go out of your way to try and like get a really big thing with this, unless things really line up and you can get a Death out early, and then maybe you have a chance of doing that, but probably not, because if your Death is cheap, a lot of things have blown up, and the Phoenix Force probably won't hit it. But this is definitely, I think, a fun idea, but it's certainly not going to be taking the crown for best Lockjaw deck anytime soon. But if you miss the old days of Thanos Lockjaw, maybe this is a fun one to give a try. And hey, if the Phoenix Force does end up popping out of the Lockjaw, you can just move it somewhere else. And then last deck we have here is just a Thanos full destroy list, so doesn't opt to go the Lockjaw route. We just opt to include pretty much all the destroy cards we can. Again, Iceman for a little bit of tech, but flexible 1-drop. We just want something that can interact with the opponent a bit, and we can also blow up for value. Also, it's not that bad to get off of the Phoenix Force, potentially, depending on what your opponent's trying to do on the final turn. Thanos Destroy, I've played quite a bit of it. It's not the best deck in the world, but I don't think it's as bad as people often say it is. But I do wonder if the Phoenix Force will make the cut long term. However, with the Time Stone, sometimes we'll be able to ramp it out early, and maybe the fact that opponents not really knowing which they have to play around going into turn 5, if you're going to play the Nimrod, if you're going to play the Phoenix Force, maybe that gives us a little bit of benefit. Though, again, be very careful with that Killmonger, because if your Phoenix Force comes back as a 1-drop, you want to make sure you don't blow it up by accident. And there we have it. Those are day 1 Phoenix Force decks. I'd like to hear what you think about this card in the comments below. Let me know. Are you excited for this one? Were there some build ideas you figured out that I didn't feature here? I'd love to hear it, because being totally honest, this is probably one of the cards I've found it harder to build decks for, just because it does two very, very different things that don't really overlap with each other. But even though I don't think it's the best card in the world right now, I do think it's going to be fun to mess around with, so I'm looking forward to that at least. And who knows, maybe when the meta opens up a bit, potentially with the next patch, maybe this card will have a little bit more chance to shine, much like we saw with Nimrod, where Nimrod really didn't hit the ground running when he first came out in his season, but now he's actually having quite a bit of success in Destroy, so hopefully we can see a similar longer-term success story for the Phoenix Force in the future. But that is going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.